welcome to this latest Wednesday at 2 p.m. session that we're producing for our members, involving our members, trying to bring you the latest information from a variety of jurisdictions that are relevant for private wealth advisors and other advisors to high net worth clients. Today we're focusing on Cyprus. We've got a 5-person panel that we're going to come to shortly. The format of today is to speak to each of our panelists for about 45-50 minutes, and we're going to come right at the end of the session to our breakout room, which we will participate in with our PCD members here on Zoom. We're also joined live on YouTube by a broader audience. So after we've had our discussion with our panelists, we'll say goodbye to our YouTube audience and we'll finish off the session with a bit of networking. Great to have you all with us today for another one of these sessions, hoping to learn a lot. So coming to our first speaker, we have Head Amitai, partner at Memery Crystal in London. Head, good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon.
Very much like your tropical background there, Head. Good to have you with us. Head, you're just going to kind of set the scene on Cyprus with us today, looking at when advisors are choosing jurisdictions, how they kind of judge Cyprus versus other European locations. So I'm just going to share a slide deck, which we're actually going to share with our participants later on, but I will just bring that up now so that we can get into that discussion. So Head, how is it that you see, as we open out this discussion, how is it that you see Cyprus versus other jurisdictions on a variety of things that advisors might consider with their clients?
Yeah, thanks, David. Well, I mean, we've been using Cyprus as a jurisdiction, both as a holding company and as a middle company for clients who are looking either to set up in Europe or use Cyprus or a European jurisdiction as a way of using double tax treaties in other jurisdictions. Now, as you know, the UK has been the offshore jurisdiction of Europe for many, many years. And we have seen the part of the UK within the structure disappearing over the past few years. The offshore bit of Europe has gone. If you see from the table itself, Cyprus has now got one of the lowest corporation tax rates in Europe. Well, it's 12.5%, which is lower than most jurisdictions. Ireland has got 12.5% as well, but they have a 25% passive income rate. And that means that if we look at setting up businesses within Europe, the jurisdiction we would look for are normally, it used to be the UK, now it's Cyprus. We would look at Malta as well, but not necessarily in the same way. There is a comparison normally between Malta and Cyprus. What we have found over the last 10 years, it's been a cycle. Previously, Cyprus was the rave. Malta started about 10 years ago. Everyone said we have to move to Malta. And now actually we're finding that people are coming back to Cyprus. There is a differentiation between the two. We're finding that the Cypriot teams are much more confident with the work they do. We find that the accounting work is much better, and it makes simpler sense to work with Cyprus than it is with Malta. As I said, Ireland has got 12.5% corporation tax rate, but it's more complicated. What we found is that if you set up within Europe, large corporation, American corporation will go to Ireland, banks will go to Luxembourg. It used to be the case that the UK serves both, but now with Brexit, we're finding that we're missing a lot of that business, and we're finding that private clients and businesses for individuals are mainly based in Cyprus, or we're advising on Cyprus. I don't know if you can push on to other slides. If you look at the one to do with the Brexit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what we have found is actually that now the UK is outside of Europe. So we're out of the VAT territory, which is something that clients look for. So we would prefer to set up somewhere where you are within the VAT territory. The EU parent subsidiary directives, interest royalty directives, merger directives, no longer apply for the UK. That basically means that if you're building a corporation, a group with international bans to it within Europe, it doesn't make sense to set up a holding company in the UK or to have a part of it within the UK unless you've got business interests in the UK. So then you find that actually putting a holding company above it within a European jurisdiction probably makes sense. Question is, how do you put it and where do you put it? What we found is we use Cyprus as a very good jurisdiction. If we go to the next slide, which is, promises, I think the last slide, what we found is a very common use of Cyprus is when we deal with people in the UAE. It's an interesting prospect. So up to recently, we had Israeli businesses trying to go into the UAE market, the EMEA market, and they failed spectacularly because obviously there were restrictions. What we have done was set up a holding business in Cyprus that was able to then deal with the UAE. At the same time, we've got clients coming out of the UAE looking for other jurisdictions where they can trade from. So what we have found is that we're putting out a holding company in Cyprus and using the double tax treaties that we have within Cyprus to invest in various other jurisdictions. So while Dubai is a brilliant jurisdiction with no taxation locally, it is not enough because the double tax treaties that it has are limited. Whereas if you bring it into Europe, you open yourself up to other jurisdictions, other double tax treaties, better permutation of businesses. So not sure if I got any more time, but I thought.
Okay, yeah. I mean, the final point would be to say is, well, are there particular parts of the Cyprus toolkit that you find interesting, useful? You know, whether it's funds, patent box. Are there certain bits of the law that you think are very useful in certain circumstances?
I think it's really the people. The interesting bit is the people that it's very easy to access the advice that you need. English law is accepted within Cyprus. The differences are minute. You can set up and structure as you need to, and it's very easy to get access to the right kind of authorities within Cyprus, which might be a bit more difficult in other jurisdictions. And so I think that's...
Okay, great. Yeah, so that's very interesting, Head, as a way of setting the scene, and we'll pick up with Andreas on some of those Brexit points and with Christina from Trident on some of the funds. But now just to come to John Howarth. So John has lived all around the world and operated businesses from different parts of the world, but has chosen to relocate to Cyprus, which he did in 2019. So good afternoon, John.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, David.
So it'd be interesting to hear a little bit about your backstory and how you came to select Cyprus as a jurisdiction to run a business from.
Yeah, well, both myself and my business partner, Harry, we left the UK about 25 years ago. We worked together in the Middle East, in Bahrain, over 20 years ago, and enjoyed working together. And then for different reasons, our paths went different ways. Harry was working with primarily with institutions, selling AI-based solutions to them, advising them on those. And I was working in private equity and working over in Southeast Asia for the last 15 years. And then our paths crossed again about 3 years ago, and we decided to bring the AI solutions to different parts of Europe. So we had to choose a location, and we came up with Cyprus. You know, I had a spell in Cyprus here. I've lived in 13 countries in 25 years. But I was in Cyprus 2000, 2001, really enjoyed it. God, I couldn't believe how the country's changed or the islands changed in that time. But I always knew I was going to come back here. And when we started looking at, the right location to have a European base to establish our company, along the lines of what the previous speakers just mentioned, then Cyprus was top of the list.
Okay, and I mean, how do you give us a sense of the business environment? You know, you've worked in lots of different places. What do you find of, getting business done in Cyprus? Is it something that is smoothly done? What's your perspective?
Yeah, it's vibrant. I think there's certain things that contribute to that. I mean, the thing that drew us, apart from my emotional ties or whatever, the thing that drew us here was the favourable tax regime, but it's the infrastructure, everything. I mean, they've, I was speaking to one of the other speakers before this, and I can be in Nicosia, which is the other side of the island, in maximum an hour and a half. It'd be like me if I was in the UK trying to make a journey to Birmingham. I'd need to allow 3-4 hours for that, depending on what can happen. So you can get around the island very easily. It's very accessible. Geographical location is perfect. We're an hour away from Israel. We're 3.5 hours away from the UAE. From the UAE, we can go anywhere really. I'm a 4.5 hours from the UK. So, it takes lots and lots, and the climate's wonderful as well. So, the whole thing, and it's just a very, very enjoyable way to do business. And it's rapidly developing, as some of the other speakers will be talking about. So, we just wanted to, we felt we were positioning ourselves in the flow of money, really. I think there's going to be a lot of money coming into Cyprus, and that the growth will only accelerate over the next 4 or 5 years.
I think that position between the UAE and the UK, I think, is an interesting one strategically, isn't it? I mean, do you see more kind of UAE type business being done with professionals on the island?
I mean, myself and Harry both worked in the UAE for 4 or 5 years. So we established quite a lot of contacts there, a lot of main banks are there, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's the perfect place for us to have a foothold into that market, really. And I'm looking forward to doing some business there when we can travel again. It's been very difficult. We launched our business 1.5 years ago, and we've hardly been able to travel, as you know. So.
Sure. And so your business is in the financial services industry. I mean, tell us a little bit more about the business and the opportunity that you're exploiting from Cyprus.
Yeah, well, the main theme is Harry was working with a company which have an AI solution to assist asset managers with risk management, really, for managing their clients' assets. So up until us moving here and starting to get things moving here, I mean, this has been used exclusively in the Italian market, where the guy who created the system is based, used by Italian private banks and big institutions. It's not new, and it's something that delivers ridiculously benchmark beating returns with 2/3 of the risk or 3/4 of the risk. So, it's a very, very good thing. It's not been marketed anywhere outside of Italy. So that's what myself and Harry are going to be doing with it. So we'll be, our target market is institutions to try and assist them with the management of their clients' assets. And then we'll also advise private clients as well, ultra high net worths, through asset managers in the Isle of Man and whatever. So,
I mean, give us a sense of the professional community in Cyprus as well. I mean, Head mentioned the quality of the people is one of the things he notes about working with people. I mean, is there a vibrant community amongst the different types of service providers you see on the island getting together, trying to collaborate? Obviously, it's unique times right now, but what's your picture of that?
Yeah, I think, most of the companies as well, they have highly skilled workforces. So it means that everybody you're speaking to normally, there's always exceptions, but, when you're speaking to an organization, services provider, a lawyer, accountancy firm, right the way from the receptionist up, they know how to deal with people. So they're geared to doing business and doing business correctly. And that's something, that varies. All the countries that I've worked in, I've worked in Europe, I've worked in Asia, I've worked in the Middle East. And you compare all these things. So there's no one country, everybody says which is the best country I've lived in. There's no one country, I mean, to me, it's a question of having a list of 10 things which are important to me, which may be different to you, whatever. And if you tick 7 or 8 of those, then, and you can make do with the other 2, then that's fine. And Cyprus ticks as many boxes as any country I've lived in. Singapore was another one which was the same kind of thing. But, to say that Cyprus could be in the category of Singapore is a big, big statement,
Yeah. I think from the UK, we've often known of Cyprus as a retirement destination because of favourable pension reliefs and things like that. But I mean, the picture must be broader than that. So why don't you give us a sense of people who choose to come and live there? What do you observe of people who come to choose to live there, whether it's from the UK or elsewhere?
Well, it is. You've got, I mean, where we decided to live is in Pathos, which is really sleepy retirement kind of place. There are some accountants, lawyers here and whatever, but as I was speaking to one of the other speakers who was speaking later, who's based in Limassol. Limassol is vibrant. You know, the minute you go to Limassol, we have our office space there. It's a vibrant hub of activity. Of course, it's not been for the last 12 months, but it is. You can feel it. You know, you can, believe me, I've worked in all these different countries. You can just feel it, you can sense it. Just at the point where we were starting to enjoy it then, and you know, start to move around in it, obviously we got locked down. But you can definitely feel that things are happening here. You know, once this COVID situation is out of the way, I think there's only one way Cyprus will be going, and that's you know, forward rapidly.
Okay, great. Well, we'll come back to both Head and John for some questions shortly. Do put your questions in the chat. If you've got questions or comments for either Head or John, please put them in the chat, and we'll bring them back into the conversation. But just to bring George,
I mean, just one thing. Sorry. With Cyprus, you know, recently the Cyprus Investment Funds Association, CIFA, said that Cyprus is the destination of choice for investment funds. And I think that could be the case. And we're obviously in the area of investment funds. It's got a long way to go, obviously, as the previous speaker said. Yeah. Luxembourg manages 4.7 trillion. Jersey's about 365 billion. And I think Cyprus regulated funds is about 8 billion. So there's a long way to go, but you can see where the market's going.
Interesting, and we're going to pick up with Christina on trends in funds. So thank you for adding that point. Very, very, very helpful. George Campanellas from Invest Cyprus. So we're chatting there with John about someone who's decided to come and base themselves in Cyprus. You actively work with entrepreneurs looking at options on the island. Perhaps you want to give us a sense of what you do at Invest Cyprus and how you work with companies considering a move.
Yes, thank you, David. So Invest Cyprus is a non-for-profit organization owned by the government, and our mandate is to promote the island abroad and provide support to entrepreneurs, to big companies and investors that are looking for investment opportunities into the island. And we provide support throughout the whole investment process. Since 2019, when we introduced our 5-year strategic program, we give emphasis into attracting more tech companies into the island, either to base their European headquarters or their regional headquarters, or proceed with a development center. The reason that we choose that is mainly because it proved through the years that the island is very well positioned to host such operations. We need to share with our delegates the fact that Cyprus, over the last 30 years, grew into the #1 maritime center in Europe, hosting around 250 shipping management companies. So already we have proven as a headquartering location in the shipping sector, in the maritime sector. So we decided to push forward this new thing for Cyprus to attract more tech companies. And in order to do that, we amended the immigration policy to make the issue of work permits for tech professionals more easy. And we assist and support and work with existing companies that they look for jurisdictions within the EU to locate their offices and move people. And I'm happy to share with you that over the last 6 months, 7 big companies have made decisions to move something like 800 people, software engineers, into the island. And it's amazing this outcome specifically during the pandemic. So what I would like to put on the table is not just only the financial part and the structures, but also the business activities, international business activities into the island. We see these companies choosing Cyprus for a number of reasons. Most of them have been already mentioned, like the tax, but also there are some incentives for the employees like 50% deduction on the personal taxation for a period of 10 years for the new for the people that relocate. Also, in regards to the tech and the ICT sector, I'm sure that it might be covered later on more explicitly. We have a fantastic intellectual property regime that can drive the corporate tax from 12.5 as low as 2.5%, and make Cyprus very attractive, specifically for the companies of the ICT sector. And are all those advantages described by John in regards to the cost of living, the quality of life, the easiness of families, and to get around and make the relocation journey as easy as possible. As Invest Cyprus, we stand ready to support with providing information and with guiding any company that is interested to examine Cyprus as a potential jurisdiction, and that's exactly our main role.
Thanks. Well, we might bring Head back in on that point shortly around the tech companies, but just staying with you, George. I mean, we were last together in Mumbai in February before the outbreak of the main part of the pandemic, and you'd also been with us down to South Africa. You know, so you have a broad reach from Cyprus into many different geographic markets and attract businesses from many different centres. Where do you see the current and sort of future hotspots for demand for Cyprus from perhaps emerging markets or places that are less, less known than the UK to the audience?
Yes, thank you, David, for the question. Indeed, we don't concentrate in any specific geographic markets. We try to reshape all the time our FDI framework and make it more attractive, follow all the trends. And we've seen the past 1 year, I would say, which was a very difficult year for every country in attracting FDI. Interest coming from nearby Israel or the MENA region, Asia, North Europe, because now, you know, the COVID changes the way people and corporates see the various jurisdictions and the new norms that are being applied. We've seen interest from Northern European countries. This is something new, I would say, to us. And we work also at the same time with 2 US big IT companies. And that is very surprising because, you know, all these changes and disruptions obviously open up the markets, and we are ready to look in every possible jurisdiction to attract FDI into the country. And then just before closing, I would like to say to John about the funds industry. I'm also vice president of the Cyprus Investment Funds Association, and we try to do actually a good job here in Cyprus in regards to growing this market of investment funds. I'm sure Christina will cover that later on. We are now at 8 billion funds under management, a long way to go, but we are very optimistic.
Okay, terrific. Maybe just to bring Head back in on the point that George raised about tech companies and the use of specific legislation in Cyprus around exploitation of IP. I mean, Head, I don't know if I'm throwing you a hospital pass here or if this is the sort of thing that you look at.
No, that's absolutely fine. I mean, absolutely. So first of all, IP Box, looking at ways to somehow keep value within structures. We've looked at various IP Box jurisdictions along the years. We've looked at trademarks and look at what we've seen with tech companies these days is that what they do is less of IP, more of trying to look at royalty schemes, look at ways of providing substance within jurisdictions and making sure that they get the tax credits that they need in the various jurisdictions. What we found is that you need to have a minimum level of tax rate in order to be considered non-offshore jurisdictions. America to one side, most of Europe accepts the fact that, in most other jurisdictions accept the fact that 12.5% is reasonable. It hasn't been noted as in too many jurisdictions too low. And so from that perspective, actually having a base in Cyprus and being able to create permanent establishment there, being able to have a holding company or management and control from there will allow you to then get the double tax treaty allowances that you would get in other jurisdictions. So yeah, we're seeing more of that happening. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I guess the more Cyprus works with, say, for example, certain jurisdictions like the Israeli tech scene, the more knowledge there is between them, the more contacts, you get a virtuous circle of knowledge of players and industry knowledge that then informs the administration of these structures. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. What we've seen is also, so you're right. I mean, a lot of companies, a lot of tech companies would have gone offshore for a lot of the times. You will have Isle of Man structures, you'll have Jersey structures, Gibraltar, in a sense, trying to reduce the taxation overall. And this is what we're seeing now is actually a move towards regulatory structures, jurisdictions where you are taxed at a reasonable rate. So unlike the UK, which I'm sorry to say, corporation tax is now going up to 25%, according to Rishi Sunak.
Breaking news.
Yeah, breaking news. If you can keep with around about 12.5%, 15% max, then people are willing to pay to get the substance that allows them to be seen as onshore. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Head. That's very, very helpful. So Andreas, just to bring you in, Andreas Mercouri from Trident in Cyprus. Welcome, Andreas.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
So we heard from Head a little bit about Brexit, and then we just heard some breaking news about the corporation tax rate in the UK. I know that you're working very closely with London colleagues on trying to, figure out what solutions can be provided in your group. I mean, perhaps give us a flavour of Brexit as you see it from your position in Cyprus.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that we've got breaking news today just goes to show how much of a moving beast this thing is with regards to some of the uncertainty around Brexit. But what I can share is basically discussions that we've been having, with clients to date, working with our UK office as well. I mean, okay, with regards to what clients are considering, discussions pretty much started with the initial vote that, UK will be leaving the EU, because depending on the nature of the business or the size of the business, of course, there was a lot of discussion around, well, what could our alternatives be, or what are the solutions to as an alternative to the UK. So I suppose with regards to what we've seen or what options are there, it really does depend on the type of business and the reasons why a client may have a UK presence in the first place. I mean, just to take the very simple example, I mean, if the UK company is just for having a presence within the EU, then of course the solution is just pretty much saying, well, okay, if I want to continue being in the EU, receiving the benefits for trading, etc., then what are my alternatives? And that's when you make that comparison, or you make your decision of where you could possibly relocate. So that in that instance, it's more of a relocation rather than a restructuring, and that's where we've already seen, clients making that decision to relocate from the UK to Cyprus, and we've heard the examples from John and from George as to some of the examples of the decisions to relocate or the headquartering based here in Cyprus. If the UK presence does actually need a physical presence for other reasons, that's where you could consider having a subsidiary or a branch or some other presence in Cyprus, so that you can still continue to receive those benefits. I mean, we've had a case where, if it was a trading company which, imported and then distributed throughout the EU, but they were physically importing goods into the UK. So not such a simple example of, okay, let's just relocate to Cyprus and have everything done from Cyprus. There may still be that need for a UK presence, but in terms of what they may actually need for the distribution, they could just set up they just needed to set up a Cypriot branch, let's say, to have a EU registered address, some of the requirements around the labeling for their products, etc. So, we've seen that case as well. But unfortunately, as I said, it is a ongoing and changing beast. So there's still circumstances that change, and people still sort of waiting to see what the outcome will be before making any decisions.
Yeah, so it's evolving. People are definitely, obviously, under pressure to actually create solutions. So it's interesting to see that you've started seeing some people taking action. I mean, just before the call, we were chatting on how things have changed around substance and how much more important substance is now in the trust and corporate services world. I mean, how do you feel that Cyprus is positioned in terms of, family office setup, perhaps, or people who are looking to create an office setup and get professional staff in order to help them manage structures? Are you well positioned for high skilled?
Yeah, I mean, okay, I think the trend or the change that we've seen there, I mean, Cyprus has been involved in the international business scene for the last 3 decades or so. So, the wealth of experience there in managing structures. And as Head sort of pointed out as well, now with regards to substance, it's more a question around actually getting the people on the ground, and it's not so much just managing a structure, but assisting clients in that setup. And we've assisted clients make that relocation, if you like, to set up their company, relocate staff. I mean, okay, we've been through the advantages and everything as to helping that decision making around the tax incentives offered to staff, or to even the private clients you mentioned, as to benefits offered there for them to relocate. But yeah, I mean, there is a good pool of professionals on island that can really support those decisions and that move.
And I mean, looking for sort of growth markets, I mean, we mentioned the UAE as being, in more normal times, a market that you can travel to easily from Cyprus. I mean, where is it that you look to, do you think, for opportunity for new structures? I mean, Brexit is one part of the European challenges that we're all having, but it's a big world out there, and there's lots of opportunity in other parts of the world. Where do you see opportunity for Cyprus on a more global kind of footing? Well,
I mean, if we take the sort of the existing client base that we're used to working with, it's not just for the Cyprus companies that we would provide services for. I mean, we would also assist with managing a lot of these typical offshore structures for clients. And now with the challenges faced in a lot of those offshore territories, the requirements for substance, the opportunity for Cyprus there has been to actually, consider re-domiciling or restructuring those structures through Cyprus. So there's the transformation, if you like, from offshore to onshore. And at the same time, it's looking at the other jurisdictions where we can source business. We touched on Israel. I mean, Israel has been, I think, a good strategic partner and for Cyprus over the years. And I think with the more incentives that are being offered, whether it's for the tech companies, for the funds, which Christina will cover, I think a lot of opportunity is going to be there from Israel. And I suppose with the strategic positioning or the geographic location of Cyprus, you've got the close proximity to Israel, you've got the Middle East as well, Europe. So I think there's a number of opportunities there for Cyprus to look at.
Okay, terrific. And on that note, just to bring Christina in, Christina Economou from Trident in Cyprus. Welcome, Christina. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So just picking up on the funds point, I mean, John mentioned, the growth in Cyprus funds, and, it's a big mountain to climb to become the sort of get into the Premier League jurisdictions. But I mean, it'd be great to hear a little bit about the Cyprus funds regime and where you see opportunities for it and where advisors should be thinking of it.
Yeah, thank you, David. Well, I'm always excited to talk about the Cyprus fund industry, which has become one of the most dynamic sectors of Cyprus, with a fully upgraded and modernized regulatory framework ready to compete, with the other traditional fund jurisdiction. It is a challenge, but I'm sure we're gonna get there. Just before presenting, the advantages of the Cyprus fund industry, very, very briefly, and what John said and George, since 2016, we do see a remarkable growth of 200% in the total assets under management, which is a significant growth. It gives us the signal that Cyprus is being recognized and has impressed the global asset management and investor community. Now, the main attractions of the funds are, as I said, of course, it's the island's cost effectiveness. It's flexible and modernized legislation, the regulatory framework, which is brought in procedures and products designed to speed up time to market. So there are fund products that are easily to set up and in a time frame that for the fund managers to launch it. The major market players recognized and accepted Cyprus, which is another good sign for the Cyprus fund sector, which as a result, a lot of international fund platforms in the likes of Clearstream and Bloomberg are listing Cyprus funds on their platforms. Cyprus offers both the EU regulator UCITS and the alternative investment funds. Now, although the island attracted some of the UCITS management companies, the alternative investment funds are the ones building momentum and seems to dominate the Cypriot investment fund scene. Now, going back to the advantages of Cyprus as a fund hub and pursuant to the membership within the EU, Cyprus is subject to and obliged to be in compliance with the EU directives and regulations. That means that having a Cyprus fund for a fund manager, they allow the fund manager to promote and having the passport rights within EU. Another benefit sits with the CISEC, the regulator in Cyprus, which is committed to maintaining an open channel of communication with industry professionals. But there are also a number of times, and I'm talking about of a personal experience, that they participated in joint discussions with fund promoters to assist the smooth operation of the funds. Another angle that CISEC is looking at is the technology and the new tools that are constantly being deployed. And CISEC is currently working on a platform to allow fund promoters to submit their applications online. Cyprus offers one of the most attractive fund tax regimes in Europe, both for the fund managers and the fund itself. As said by my fellow speakers, there are over 60 double tax treaties, and the inclusion of new provisions such as the taxation of carried interest or performance fees for a NAIF or a UCITS fund manager, and or the tax incentives to high earning managers. Taxation is an important element of the investors' attraction. Now, Cyprus' main draw card is the ease of doing business. I think John has already touched upon it of his personal experience. And also the very large network of support companies and service providers. Big Four accounting firms are well established on the island, as well fund administrators with global expertise, such our firm Trident Trust. Now, lastly, as already mentioned by my fellow speakers, and by virtue of being one of the few former British colonies situated in EU, Cyprus has inherited the English legal system and values. So our independent judicial system applies the principles of common law guidance from English statutes and the case law, which is quite important, especially for the UK managers who are familiar with the system.
Okay, thank you. I mean, and do you also see private families using funds as part of their structuring? I mean, it's a niche area, obviously often favouring the trust or company and traditional structures, but have you seen that occurring at all, or this is the funds piece is an institutional play and it's got its place in the market? What do you see from that area?
No, thank you for the question. Actually, at Trident Trust Cyprus, we have seen indeed, and we have worked with high net worth family offices restructuring through funds, mainly due to a better control and also the incentivization they want to offer to their family office team members. So a fund structure can provide the element of control and asset protection, while at the same time permits the family office team to be remunerated in a similar way with fund managers, and which aligns to the interests of the families whose assets they manage. So the returns on investments are really incentivized and can bring, of course, better results. Who doesn't get better results if you don't get, if you are not remunerated of them? So using a fund structure provides a recognized and well-established legal framework, which allows them to become either multi-family office, private equity fund managers, or even boutique wealth managers. Now, trust and foundations, I will agree with you, David, are great vehicles for holding and administering the family office assets. But when it comes to a more complex structure, multiple investments with different pool of assets, a number of different investment managers, and the segregation also of the assets, then I believe a fund-like structure becomes more attractive.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to bring John Howarth back in, and I'll come back to you then, Christina. But John, what's your perspective on? Is there anything particular that's holding the fund development of the fund sector back? You're on a great trajectory. Is it just about education? You've got the infrastructure, you've got all those benefits we were talking about. Is there anything you see that needs to be done to take it forward onto that next level?
I think it is more about education, like you said. Yeah. I think it's more and more people, myself, whatever, beating the drum. For the same reasons that myself and Harry decided to choose Cyprus to relocate our business. That's something we then in turn will tell our clients. If our clients are looking for, where's the best place to incorporate the business now, et cetera, then, Cyprus will be top of the list for the reasons that my colleagues, previously mentioned. So, the only criticism myself and Harry would have had is that they need to make it easier to open bank accounts. Maybe Christina's laughing, because the hardest part we had, everything else, incorporating the company, setting everything up, your MEMS and articles and tax registration, everything. And, it was done in reasonable timeframes. But the opening of a bank account, my goodness me. So, I think if we're going to attract more and more, because every business, whatever business it is, whether it's an IT company, whether it's a new fund, whether it's a family office, whatever, whether it's an individual, they need bank accounts. And the process for opening bank accounts, I know that the regulations are tightened all around the world. But here, I could probably see Harry on the other, if he's listening, and be laughing at this. But, apart from that, it's just word of mouth and people becoming more educated and seeing the opportunities here.
And when you're dealing with institutions around Europe, they recognise if you're based in Cyprus, you're running a Cyprus domicile structure or something, that is, they have the respect for that. The reputation is strong.
Exactly, yeah. It's regarded as, certainly a very, very viable centre. They know it's highly regulated, which again, we've come from an Asian background, we've been based in Asia where the regulations weren't too strict. We've come over here, so it's, very, very well regulated, very well run. And like I've said before, the infrastructure, the technology, everything, the skilled level of workforce, so when you go and speak to these corporate service providers or lawyers, accountants, they're knowledgeable people and they want to do business, and they're very capable of doing that. So
brilliant. Thank you, John, for that perspective. Christina, just to bring you back in, banking for structures globally, I think, is an issue. It's one of the leading bugbears of any administrator. What's your perspective on that quickly as we just sort of
yeah. I mean, I'm coming from, my background is banking, and I used to enjoy working in the bank a lot because I really had the opportunity to meet different cultures and help people. But nowadays, it's becoming the challenge of the financial sector. However, the way we try to assist, if you like, our clients from our experience, we also use these, the modern banking institutions, the MIE, especially for payments and ease of transactions. And when it comes, of course, to extra liquidity of high net worth individuals that they want to place their funds somewhere that they feel safe, then of course we're gonna seek for the traditional banking institutions.
Okay, thank you. Question from Nick Hockney. Thanks for your question, Nick. He's just saying the regulator is key to growth, particularly when competing against Luxembourg or Ireland. Do you see that? I mean, you mentioned an amenable regulator that is robust but that is approachable. Is that an important aspect here?
It is an important aspect, both the regulator and the government, and I'm sure George here will confirm that are very keen to grow the sector, the fund industry sector, and that's why we have seen since 2014, where the initial regime of the alternative investment fund was introduced, we do see very regularly updates of the legal framework.
Okay, thank you. George, did you have anything to add on that point of the regulator being both robust and user-friendly, and that'll help give you an edge as you develop the funds and other business lines? George just on mute there, but we've got another question from Alex Porter. I might just put that to you, Christina. Thank you, Alex, for your question. Just asking, are there any, there might not be any available figures, but are there any available figures around numbers of registered foundations or PTC structures? I mean, it doesn't have to be numbers, but what's your feeling on, as a proportion of the overall number of structures administered, are foundations part of that mix? Is PTCs? There's a lot of airplay about PTCs and very bespoke ultra high net worth structures, but what's your take?
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Cyprus actually is a trust jurisdiction, so we don't do foundations, but we establish trusts. And as you can understand, trusts it's a vehicle that is not publicly available and registered. Parts of it, and not the sensitive, are registered with the regulator, SISEC once again, but I can't really say the number of trusts that we have established at Cyprus. Now, when it comes to PTC structures, this is something that is undergoing with Cyprus, is not yet there. There is a drafted law that is being discussed currently, and hopefully we will be able to, provide the PTC structure as we know it from the Channel Islands.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, we're going to go to our breakout rooms now for the last 10 minutes. Thank you for those questions. We'll bring you back at 3 o'clock. We're going to say bye to our YouTube